Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, sisters. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for joining me, Coach Fahmeeda, today, where I'm going to be talking about my journey and my sort of outlook on becoming peaceful with my imperfections. So I'll start with the dua. Inna alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. O my Lord, open my chest and ease my task for me. Remove the impediment from my speech so that they may understand what I say. So thank you again for joining me, sisters. And I'd like to begin by asking you all to share, what does perfection mean for you? So if you can just type that in the chat box. And do we have any self-proclaimed perfectionists with us here today? So if anybody considers themselves a perfectionist, you can share your experiences with that. So perfection is, obviously, it's very personal and has very individual meanings to everyone, so it'd be interesting to see how everybody defines that. So Rosina says, yes, definitely, I am getting everything right. So you always want to get everything right. Yeah, guilty, sis. Anybody else? Living up to expectations. I'm in rehab. Because I was a bit wary about sharing perfectionism, because I thought I'd come across as the only weirdo that has struggled with being a perfectionist. So it would be nice to see that I'm not the only person. So perfectionism can lead to destruction, absolutely. Dr. Amina, wanting everything perfect with everything. Yes. So as you've all probably gathered, this was one of the rules that I placed on myself, and it started from a very young age. I think it probably began with the messages that I got from my parents about doing very well in probably school and, you know, higher education. So it's something that from a very young age, I had this misunderstanding between high standards and being motivated and disciplined. And this kind of transformed into a very rigid, unhealthy, obsessive perfection, where, you know, I think somebody just said it in the chat box, that it doesn't matter how good you do, where even your best isn't good enough. So it started off, I've now realized after becoming a coach, that it starts off in our thoughts, and the thought that I started to believe that I had to be perfect, this became a rule for me. And when I felt imperfect, I would experience, you know, lots of feelings with that. So when I didn't meet my goals, I would feel like a failure, and I would feel very frustrated, and I would feel annoyed, and, you know, sometimes even angry. And I, you know, felt these feelings of shame, because I felt like, you know, this is, you know, it's very extreme what I'm feeling. So I realize now that there was a deeper root to this, and that was that I didn't actually feel worthy enough. So internally, because I felt so far from perfect, I was always trying to be perfect on the outside to prove to myself. And it wasn't just proving to myself, but proving my worth to others. And, you know, this is, you know, a very dangerous place to be, because, you know, you innocently give away your self-worth to others. And if they think you're perfect, then you're perfect. And if they don't, then, you know, you're not you know, you're a failure. So it left me very vulnerable to what other people thought about me, and I was always chasing my self-worth. And any sort of, you know, mistake or, you know, disapproval that I would get from somebody, I took that very personally, because it made me feel, you know, it added to my feelings of imperfection. So it was a vicious cycle. And it's this voice that you have inside of you. We all have thoughts, you know, constantly running in our mind. And when you're a perfectionist, your inner voice is a very critical voice. So whenever I would make any sort of mistake, that, you know, that inner voice just grew louder. And, you know, I couldn't see any of the good that I was doing. I was obsessed with the mistakes that I would make. So it was living in this way, and it, you know, it's quite a hard way to live. And the thing is, with perfectionism, it manifests on your outside life, but it's actually the opposite of internal growth, because when you want to internally grow, you have to, you know, face up to your fears. You have to be very honest with yourself, and you have to, you know, take the chances. And when you're a perfectionist, you know, you're so scared of slipping up that, you know, any opportunities that come your way, because of the fear of failure, you don't want to try new things. So even though on the outside, you know, and, you know, as a perfectionist, you've got all these high standards, but it's very ironical that you can't ever push past this glass ceiling that you've placed upon yourself. You become a prisoner to this way of living, that actually you're not able to grow, because you want to always be safe, and you don't want to make any sort of mistakes. So, you know, the way that I've seen, you know, how do we judge what perfection is? You know, how do we measure this? It's, you know, it manifests on our outer life. So how do we judge it? We judge it by looking at how perfect we are. And this is how perfect our life is. So do we have the perfect life? Do we have the perfect marriage? Do we have the perfect body? Do we have the perfect home, the perfect family, the perfect career? And I could go on and on, all the things that, you know, we desire to be perfect in our life. So, you know, obviously there's nothing wrong with, you know, desiring to have, you know, these blessings, because, you know, Allah, you know, alhamdulillah, he can bless us with all these things. But the danger is when we, you know, place our sense of self on the, you know, the blessing that on the perfection of these blessings, that if I don't have the perfect body, then, you know, this means this about me, this means that I'm a failure, this means that I'm not good enough. Or if I don't have the perfect marriage, then this means that I'm not a good enough woman. So this is when we take this blessing or lack of the blessing very personally, because we've associated who we are with that blessing. So when things don't go to our perfect plan, we become really miserable. So if we don't have the perfect husband or the perfect home, you know, we become very dissatisfied in our life. And from this dissatisfaction, this leads to us being impatient and ingratitude. You know, it leads to us having feeling ingratitude towards Allah, astaghfirullah, and it leads to us being resentful to our tests, because of course things aren't always going to go perfectly. No matter how much we try to control our outside life, we can't control, you know, the tests that come our way. That's ultimately from Allah. And if you're always wanting it to be perfect, then, you know, any sort of bump or anything along the way, you know, it really throws you back. So what I've really realized is that letting go of my perfect plan and submitting to Allah's perfect plan really lays to rest a lot of issues. So a lot of the issues that I had in my life, when it didn't work out how I perfectly wanted, how my perfect image of my life that I had planned out, when that didn't work out, you know, it made me feel very angry and very, you know, miserable in my life, and I felt resentful. But alhamdulillah, when I submitted to what Allah has planned for me, I became content, and I realized that actually my plan is very short term, it's very limited, it's limited to my worldly desires. But Allah's plan for me is long term. It's not just for this dunya, but it's for my hereafter. So for me to trust Allah, whatever happens in my life, I realized actually that that is actually what's perfect for me. And alhamdulillah, I've, you know, reached this place of contentment in my life. And Ibn al-Qayyim, you're probably familiar with this saying, that he says that contentment is the Jannah of this dunya. So if you have contentment in your life, it doesn't matter how little you have and how to the world they, you know, measure perfection with all these things that I've listed. Even if you don't have any of them, but if you're content, then you have everything that you need, because somebody might have the perfect life, you know, through rose tinted spectacles. We see somebody and they might have the perfect life, but if they're not content, then they're not experiencing the Jannah of this dunya. So it's realizing that perfection is how Allah has planned, has created me and created my life for me. He designed my life perfectly for me. And that's how I realized that I'm actually imperfectly perfect. So, you know, not desiring perfection is perfection that comes from me, is submitting to Allah's will, and it's trusting that, you know, He knows better than what I know for myself. And one of the biggest realizations for me actually was that perfection is an outer cloak that we wear, and it's a mask that we put on, and really and truly it's a show for the outside world, because Allah doesn't need us to wear a mask for Him. He knows our deepest, you know, thoughts. He knows us better than we know ourselves. But for the outside world, like, we live to show the outside world that we kind of, you know, we're winning in our life. Like, you know, we've got a successful career, we've got a successful, you know, marriage, home, whatever it may be. But it's all, you know, it's all a show for other people really to think that, you know, we perfect. So perfection in itself is, you know, it's just to show others that we're okay. When, you know, why do we need to show that to others? Like, why do we need their approval or their praise, or for them to think that, you know, we perfect, when, you know, this boost that we'll feel from them is going to be temporary, and it's going to be very unstable, because one day somebody might think, yeah, you know, this person is like this, they're so perfect like this, but the next day, you know, or the next moment rather, they're not going to think that, because, you know, people don't think about other people, that they're thinking about their own self. But we all wrapped up in this sort of, you know, we don't even realize it, this, you know, this, the dunya that we so wrapped up in. So when we recognize that our self-worth is with Allah, this is when we let go of that outer cloak, we let go of the mask, and we become our true, authentic self. And He loves us for this. We don't need to put on a show for Allah. He loves us, you know, just the way we are, and, you know, imperfectly perfect, because that's how He created us. And I realized actually that when you change, when you go from wanting perfection in your outer life to really seeking perfection in your inner self, which is, you know, striving for perfection in your relationship with Allah, this is the only thing that we should strive for perfection is how we worship Allah, and that is ihsan. So we worship Allah like we can see Him, and we can't see Him, so we know that He sees us. So if we work on our internal self, this is working on our hearts and our minds, it's really focusing on the inner spiritual dimensions of worship that nobody else but Allah can see. So it begins with our intentions, and things like patience and contentment and gratitude. These are things that nobody can measure on the outside world. Nobody can see that in front of them manifested, but it's inside of you, and Allah knows that's inside of you. And that, if you have those things, then, you know, what I really believe is that when you work on your relationship with Allah, perfecting your ihsan, then Allah will bless you in your outer life. And that blessing might not be so obvious, but the blessing of contentment is how we will view the world. So even if you don't have, you know, all those things that we listed for perfection, you'll still feel perfect in your life, because you know that Allah, who is the perfect, created that life for you. So does anybody want to unmute themselves or share anything on the chat? So I'll read some of these comments.
There's a few comments for Fahmeeda.
So Veronica said, perfection can lead to destruction. Yep, so we talked about that. And then it's an obsession. So yes, we can get obsessed, and it's very unconscious, this obsession. Like if we don't catch ourselves, it could become, we could live our whole life like this, not knowing, and it destroys our life and it destroys the people around us as well, because when people don't fit into our perfect little boxes that we've created in our mind, then, they feel the wrath of that and we feel the wrath of that ultimately. So when, not only do we want this perfection in our life, but we want people to be perfect as well. If they don't tick every box that we have, then, our relationship suffers, when really they're just a human and they're, perfectly imperfect as well, how Allah created them. So as Mina says, striving to do the best we can, knowing that Allah's decree for us is perfect. Absolutely. So this, I often think I'm in the minority. Yeah, I did think that when I was doing this. I thought, am I going to be kind of like exposing how strange my thinking was? But alhamdulillah, I've come away from that. But even if, we are there, it's a journey that we're all on, and, everybody's tests are different to each other, and everybody's struggles that we, go through in our outer life and internally is different. So that's fine. I'm always in awe of my friend who is complete opposite. She always seems liberated, mashallah. So yeah, so we can look at other people and we might think that they're perfect, but really this lens of perfection is just through our eyes, and it's so limited. We don't know what the other person, their struggles are, and, they might look at us and think, oh, wow, like they've got this. So, we just never know. Only Allah knows. One of the most important lessons which life has taught me is that the attribute of perfection belongs to Allah alone. Absolutely. As Nina says, it's in Allah's perfect plan for us to recognize that we are imperfect. Yes, and that's what I realized, that being imperfect isn't something to be ashamed about, because, Allah created us like this, and, He said, I'm paraphrasing, but, if we didn't make mistakes, that He would have brought about another creation altogether. So the fact that we repent and we make mistakes, this is what makes us human, and this is what draws us closer to Allah, and this is what Allah loves. Zahra says, maybe we can choose the word perfection to choose the word perfection to excellence. The only creation that was perfect was our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Absolutely. So instead of using the word perfection, that's a very good point, we can use excellence, because when we strive for excellence, that means that we do our utmost. Perfection can sometimes, it's almost unreachable. So that's great. Ibn al-Qayyim said, seeing Allah means seeing the will of Allah and what He desires for you. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. I did always wonder, Asmina, what that means, how you see Allah. So if you see the will of Allah and what He desires for you, that's seeing Allah. Subhanallah. That's amazing. So we all can experience this connection with Allah. So Rosina says, yes, definitely, sis. Can totally relate. Inshallah, you are always pursuing the impossible. Nothing is ever good enough. It's like you are always in a default position. So now that, we become conscious of this, we can start changing this default. If we've lived in a certain way for so long, that does become, it's like driving the car, you do it unconsciously. So when you've experienced the world through always, trying to obsessively be perfect, that's your natural way of doing things. But you can, start challenging yourself, and maybe perfectionists have probably struggled in lockdown because their house is more busy with people, and it's more messy. So that's a good start, because that's been it's been good for me to have to accept that things are going to be just left and just to go with the flow. So I don't know if anybody else has experienced that. Sister Mary's got her hand up, so would you like to unmute, sister?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sister Fahmeeda, for another really beautiful session. I just wanted to say that although I'm not a perfectionist myself, but being surrounded by perfectionists can be difficult for those who aren't, because it kind of puts you on edge as well. So even though you don't necessarily see perfection in certain things, but their perfectionism, they're wanting to do things in a certain way, it kind of unconsciously rubs off on you. And I didn't used to realize this before, but I've realized it since, as my daughter's growing up and I'm trying to get her to do stuff around the house. Sometimes I feel like, oh, she's not going to do it properly. I should just do it myself. And that's what's kind of happening. But just then we're kind of like contending with a limitless power. SubhanAllah, we're so not. Like you said, we're very limitless. We're very limited in our plans. They can only. I mean, if you take Allah out of the equation, what are you left with? So I think being imperfect and knowing Allah is far better than trying to aim for perfection and moving away from knowing Allah. So that's what I wanted to say.
Jazakallah khair. That's really some really beautiful points there, and I completely relate. And I did really see the impact that I was having. For example, like my 15-year-old brother, his room is always a mess, and I would really struggle with it. And I've seen that, you know, how he can be on edge with that, like, you know, having all these rules about having toilet sandals and garden sandals and other, you know, putting things back in the fridge exactly where it goes. Like, it can really affect a person that isn't like that. And what you said at the end about like how we all perfect in our own way, like it's such an individual thing that we need to look for the beauty in everybody and what they bring, because, you know, having rigid rules isn't, you know, it's not a great way to, you know, it's not peaceful. And, you know, alhamdulillah that, you know, I've come away from that, and I can still see that I do still have, you know, room for improvement definitely there. But, you know, you know, you can really see when you live with somebody that isn't like that, the impact that it has on that person. So Jazakallah khair. Is there anybody else that wants to say anything? Or is this a good time to break out into the breakout rooms, Amina?
Yeah, I think it's a good time to break out. The other point that I wanted to make is with any trait that you see or that you may experience to be undesirable, if we can understand that they're coming from probably a troubled place, right? So, for example, perfectionism and what you've described now, what you were going through, it was a real battle for you. Like, you were going through your own internal struggles, but it was manifesting as wanting everything perfect. So I guess when we, as somebody who's experiencing that from a distance, having that awareness that, oh, actually, they're not doing it to be difficult, they're not doing it to be harsh, they're not doing it to make my life a misery, right? Which is what we can all do, right? Oh God, they're just so OTT or whatever. If we understand it from the lens that, my goodness, they must really be, maybe just be curious about, I wonder what's going on for them. Like, I wonder why they need things so rigid, or I wonder why they need things so meticulous. And just become more curious, then I think it opens up the door of understanding and compassion.
Definitely, that's so true. It's and that's what can save our relationships, when we don't take it so personally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's a perfect place to stop for. It's 5 o'clock on the dot. So if we have maybe 15 minutes of Fahmeeda, what do you say? And then
that's fine.
And then we'll have a roundup in the final sort of 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to put you into room, sisters. I hope you can all join and participate. It's always good to have a little chat. And then we'll bring you all back in 15 minutes. Options, and I'll put a little timer. It's 15 minutes, and you'll be allocated into a room. So you should see a screen pop up, and it will say that you've been invited to join breakout room, whatever number. And if you just press join, then you'll be moved to that room. So Tanvir, Amina Khatun, and somebody joining from the iPhone. I don't think you've joined, so if you just want to press join.
Yeah, Brit, maybe one day is okay. Next day maybe we are lazy. We are not doing the same way.
Assalamu alaikum, sisters. Sorry to disturb you. I've just noticed that Fahmeeda and Jamila, you're both in the same room. Can I share you around? Is that okay?
Yeah, you can.
So I'm going to, Razia, Sister Razia, sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to put you in another room with Fahmeeda, but otherwise it's like too
It's not enough.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So watch. Right, we're back. So would love to hear some of the conversations that happened in those rooms. You know, were there any gems? Were there any takeaways? Did anybody have any insights? Please pop in the chat box. Any realizations you had in that conversation? And Fahmeeda, how was your room? Sorry, I know I changed you around in the middle.
Yeah, so the first sister that I was talking to actually in the first room, she said something about where, you know, we can't ever be completely perfect, where one day, you know, you'll have a perfect day, quote unquote perfect, and, you know, whatever list you've got, you'll be able to, you know, do all that, and your behavior, how you want to behave and how you want to be, you'll do all that, you know, but then some days, even in your, you know, ibadah as well, you know, we try our best, you know, we can try to perfect our ibadah, but some days you just won't be able to do it like that. And then what happens is, with, you know, if you're always wanting to be perfect, the day that you have an off day, it feels like, you know, the world has come crashing down, literally. Like you're not ever allowed to have a day off as a perfectionist, but really that's where the harm, the added harm comes to you, because if you just kind of go with, you know, the flow of life and have your days on and off, then, you know, just do the best that you can and just tie your camel, then, you know, you can just accept that you're doing your best and there's no extra thinking that's, you know, that's harming you. So yeah, that's what one of the, you know, gems that I got.
Brilliant, amazing. Jamila, were there any other gems from your group? Do you want to unmute yourself, sis? No, maybe not there. Anybody else want to share? There's a few other sisters. Who wants to share what was discussed? Tanvir, go on ahead. Unmute yourself, sis.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think the thing I wanted to share more was how perfectionism is kind of consuming me a little bit in a way, because naturally when I do things, I like everything to be perfect. And even when I was working, my colleagues did say I was very meticulous. But what I find is I really resonated with one of the comments that one of the sisters said, that when you seek perfectionism, you're almost hindering yourself from progressing in life, because of that fear of being a failure, that fear of messing up. And I have found that throughout my life. Like, I've avoided trying new things in life, looking for new jobs, trying new avenues, learning new skills, because of that fear that I might mess up, I might screw up. And I end up limiting myself in options so much that I end up missing out in living life, basically. Problem with me, like, for many, many years now. I wouldn't say I'm OCD, but it has been an issue for many, many years. So yeah, I think that's what I would like to say.
SubhanAllah, and I really do resonate with that, sis, because I would get told the same thing in my colleagues wouldn't really, like working with me because I was so particular. And I can really see that, how, that ceiling that we place upon ourselves, it really does restrict us, because where we want to be perfect, actually, ironically, we hold ourselves back so much, because it's actually through our mistakes that we learn the most. It's making the mistakes, that's where the most growth is. And if you're scared of making mistakes, then you're never going to, push yourself out of that. So alhamdulillah, may this be an opportunity for you to, to continue in becoming peaceful with your imperfections as well.
Yeah. MashaAllah. Shaista says, strive for excellence instead of perfection. Love that. Absolutely. And, with excellence, there's always growth in that. There's always development, there's growth, there's beauty. And if that excellence is for the sake of Allah, then it's win-win. Because if you don't get to that bar, right, if you haven't reached it, then because it's for the sake of Allah, it's all going to be rewarded anyway. You're going to find that. It's as if you did it to the best of your ability, or if you did it, quote unquote, shouldn't really use that word, but perfectly. Do you see what I mean? So it's striving for the excellent.
And it's almost like perfection is for your own self. It's like for your ego, but excellence is for the sake of Allah, because Allah doesn't expect perfection. We weren't created, we're not angels that are never going to sin. We've been created to sin so that we can repent.
Yeah. And one of the comments that that was raised in our session was that, I thought, and I thought myself, that having that trait of perfectionism was actually a good thing, was something desirable. And it just made me really think about, well, actually, we should all be in balance. That should be the aim. And so things can be tipped out of balance very easily. Like when you don't strive for that excellence, well, then maybe you won't do it to the best standard that you could potentially do, right? But if you go over and beyond, that's another breaching of that. It loses the balance. Then if it's not to that standard, you're not content, and, us physically, emotionally, spiritually, we should all be in balance. And like you all know, there's not a fixed point for anything. It's all within range. So sometimes you may be, lower down in the range. Sometimes you might be higher in the range. But it's keeping that option available to you that you can be within that range. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's knowing that, you're trying to control the outcome, the people around you, the environment around you, but you're not in control. Allah's in control, and you know, it's Allah places so many opportunities in front of us, and because we have that fear of failure, really it's a lack of trust in Allah that we're having, that He's going to take care of us, that we don't need to be perfect to, you know, be in charge of everything and make sure everything goes to our plan, because it's never really our plan, it's Allah's plan.
Absolutely. One of the sisters said that everyone is different and everyone has different abilities or capabilities. So we just work to the best of what we can do for the sake of Allah. Yes, and it's that, for the sake of Allah. So, you know, if we're always comparing ourselves, well, that person can do X, Y, and Z, why can't I? That person has 3 kids and they're maintaining their home like that, why can't I? That person works, why can't I? That person also has this background, why can't I be like that? It's like everybody's situation is different. Their abilities and their relationships, the dynamics, everything. We can't compare like that. And if we do purely for the sake of Allah, then even if you do one small thing, that can be worth more than doing 50 things but insincerely. So again, it comes back to this ihsan. And the other thing I wanted to mention, so I think Sister Rosina says, sisters, how do you ever know you have done enough or that you have done your best? It's something I struggle with. Okay, well, Jazakallah khair for sharing. Fahmeeda, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think when you, instead of like what you were just saying about comparing to other people, because our best isn't going to be the same as somebody else's best. And when we look outwards, it can make us very unsure of ourselves. But really, if we look inside of ourselves, then we all know the answer to a lot of things. You know, you can make peace with your best because only you know and Allah knows what you can do, what is enough. And questioning it isn't, you know, it's just taking away from that surety or peace. So just trusting in your own instinct that you have.
And I think when we quieten down the busyness of our mind, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Should I be doing more? When we quieten down our busy mind, we can check with ourselves more honestly. And what I mean by that is, you will know if that was the best you could do with the resources that you had, with the time that you had, with the ability that you have, with the strength that you have, with the knowledge that you have. Deep down, we all know. But if our mind is too busy, then we can't check within ourselves. And so now what I find, sorry, Fahmeeda.
No, carry on, sorry.
So now what I find is when my mind is more quiet, I can be more honest and true, and I can be more real with myself. But you know what? I think I did do enough actually today. Or if I'm really honest with myself, I could have stretched I could have really done more. And I can have that honest, authentic conversation with myself now.
But you know, what comes to me is that even if you didn't get to achieve everything you planned, that wasn't actually ordained for you, that Allah didn't plan that for you. So there's still good in that. That doesn't mean you completely let go and you think, oh, you know, I'll become a slob now and there's nothing left to do. But if you didn't do it, then that is the plan of Allah, that wasn't meant for you. And you have to make peace that you couldn't do that, or you didn't have that in your life.
That's it. Absolutely. And that can be another way of checking yourself. Right. I didn't do 1 to 10 on my checklist or my to-do list. Am I okay with that? Like how check in with yourself. How are you feeling? Are you frustrated? Are you annoyed? Are you angry? Are you blaming other people? Are you blaming time? Or you're like, okay, well, khair, it is what it is. You know, it wasn't meant to be. I've got tomorrow, inshallah. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. You know, so check in with yourself that. How do I feel that I've not done what I planned? I think Sister Mary has got her hand up, so go ahead and unmute yourself, and then I think we'll close the session, inshallah.
Sorry, it's just a quick point while you were talking about perfectionism and comparison. I think I've spent much of my life like it was always appealing to me, perfectionists were. Like I was like, why can't I be like that, as if there was something deficient in me? Like and the thing is I think what you tend to do is you think, because you're comparing yourself, you're thinking, if that, like you said before, if that person can do it, why can't I? And it's just a quote that comes to my mind, that if you let a fish believe their whole life that they should be climbing a tree, you know, it will spend its whole life thinking that it's stupid. And you know, it's just, I think about looking at your resources, seeing what you can do and doing the best that you can do. Because if you just leave the measure up to Allah rather than trying to measure yourself, you're never gonna be able to. So I think I think comparison, it really can crush your spirit. That's what I want to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Farah's not here, but comparisonitis is a real disease. SubhanAllah. It's a real condition. And it's almost like you project yourself, I should be like that person. If I was like that person, then I'd be happy. Then I'd like myself. These are all very telltale words, language that we're using internally. We don't even realize it. So just look into and complete the sentences. Okay, if you were like Sister X, what would that mean? Fahmeeda, did you have any final words?
So I think the key thing is to be content. If you're content with yourself, you know, you'll never, because you know that Allah created you with your value and your worth, then you'll never compare to anybody else or anybody else's life. And you know, like I said before, that the saying that contentment is the Jannah of this dunya, that we all have access to that. And I just want to end with this ayah. So we all have heard this ayah that also call to mind when your Lord proclaimed, if you give thanks, I will certainly grant you more. But if you are ungrateful for my favors, my chastisement is terrible. So he will increase you if you are grateful. So that's what it is. Being content leads to gratitude, and you know, all the things that we want in our life, Allah is the one to grant us those things, but we have to be content with ourselves and be grateful for what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the byproduct of being content. When you are content, you'll be grateful, and when you're grateful, Allah gives you more. Always win-win. And Coach Jamila has said that we have to find our qualities and use it to serve Allah. Allah has granted us qualities according to the plan He has for us. So we might be trying to strive for a certain quality, but that's not what Allah wants for us. You know, subhanAllah, we might have a different purpose. We might have a different, you know, so that's really beautiful. I mean, what I find, it's really coincidental, isn't it? I say quote unquote coincidence, but I was having this conversation about perfect and perfect moments and perfect things and perfectionism. And perfectionism and striving for that perfectionism, and when you're struggling with perfectionism, goes hand in hand with not feeling content, with not being at peace. Does that make sense, Fahmeeda? Like, you know, and what's really amazing is that the name, an attribute of Allah, As-Salam, one of the meanings of As-Salam is that He is free from imperfections, that He is perfect. So the moment you appreciate that Allah is perfect, you will find that peace, because those attributes go together. And the moment you realize that you're not perfect and you're content with that, you will find contentment for yourself, because perfection is not for you. Perfection is what belongs to Allah. Does that make sense? I found it really profound, and we do have a recording from Ramadan about the name As-Salam, and I found it amazing. that the attribute of perfectionism is so closely linked to peace.
SubhanAllah, that's really blown me away. Like, perfection is not for me, and that's what we just need to remember, that it's for Allah.
We come back to truth. When we come back to truth, we find peace. SubhanAllah. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam. Tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. So alhamdulillah, sisters, really beautiful session. I hope I got most of your comments. Jazakallah khair, Fahmeeda, for hosting today and choosing the topic. You know, it's a real big one.
Jazakallah khair to everyone for joining us. I really appreciate you giving your time to us, sisters.
We'll end it now with Surah Al-Asr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.